Hey, I want to welcome everyone to this Network Church training, creating a culture of feedback. We're so glad that you're here. Real quick, my name is Brandon Donaldson. I'm the pastor of Network Churches here at Life.Church, and I just want to welcome all of our network churches, all of those open churches that got the invite and are here with us. We're so honored you're here. Develop.me churches, man, it's so great to have all of the family right here for this training. And even those that have heard about this via social media and you've joined us, we're so glad and we're so honored that you would be here. Real quick, this is what you can do right now. Right below me, you'll see a banner. Let us know that you're here. We would love to know that you're here. We would love to follow up with you with some great content around this topic afterwards. So it's just a few fields. If you could just take a moment, let us know that you're here if you haven't registered yet, or let us know. And we would love that for sure. So let me just tell you real quick, for those that are a part of the family via Open or Develop.me, Network Churches is another ministry of Life.Church.tv. And we're just passionate about partnering with them. It's really a closer relationship with Life Church as we are unified in mission and values and content. And so that's why we do things just like this, where we do training and development. But here's the deal. We are all about the capital C church. We truly believe the local church is the hope of the world. And we know that we can do infinitely more together than apart. And so having all of the family here together, we're excited about and we're honored to serve the church so that we can be better at leading His church and doing better things for Him. So thank you for being here. You're in the right place. And thank you for letting us know that you're here. Before we get started into the content, which I know you're excited about, here at Network Churches, we go over what we call our Network Church Leadership Essentials. And these are just 6 leadership principles that we put first and we do daily, because we know that when we do these 6 things, God is going to bless everything else that we do, guaranteed. We're going to be successful leaders and parents and followers of Christ. And so that's why we go through them. So I'm just going to go through them real quick. If you're new, this is probably a good time you can get out whatever you're going to be taking notes with, whether it's your iPad or your some paper and pen, because you're going to want to capture some of the things that's going to happen. But let me just tell you what these 6 leadership principles are. These are our essentials for us here at Network Churches. The first one's this. We are going to bring the spiritual intensity. And you see, I'm not a pastor first. I'm not even a father or a husband. You're not a wife or a pastor first. You're a follower of Christ. And so our passion is that we seek Him first. You know, Jesus said, seek first the kingdom of God, and all that other stuff, all those roles, man, He's got it. That'll come. But we know that our priority is seeking Him first. And so we're going to bring the spiritual intensity. Second essential principle that we're going to bring is we're going to live out moral integrity. And we're passionate about protecting our families, our marriages, our kids, our purity, our character, because we want to honor Christ and His church with integrity. And so we're going to live out moral integrity. The third thing, we are going to lead the way with irrational generosity. And there's no more irrational, generous act in the Bible than John 3:16, where it says, God so loved the world that what did He do? He gave. And that's why Pastor Robert Morris always says that we look most like Him when we give. That's why. And so we want to lead the way as leaders on being irrationally generous for Him. The fourth thing is that we will live out unity. And you might not know this, but Jesus prayed for you. He prayed for me, and in John 17, we have an opportunity to be an answer to His prayer when we live out unity. In verse 21 in John 17, Jesus is praying, and He says, that they may be one, Father, as You are in me, and I am in You, that they may be in us. Why? So that the world would believe that You sent Me. And we want to live out that unity, to be like Him, to be in Him, so people would come to know Him, which leads us to our fifth one, that we are focused on evangelism. We like to say it like this. We will do anything, short of sin, to reach people for Christ. And that's why we're passionate. We'll do things no one's doing to reach those people that no one is reaching. I think of the intensity that Jesus talks about of the shepherd. You know, I mean, leave the 99 for the one. So having a passion for the one is our heart as leaders, that God would bring that passion to us as we lead our churches, our families, to have the passion for the one. And then the last principle, essential principle is this, is that we will bring others along. We are passionate about leadership development, discipleship, in that when you do all those things, it's amazing how people will follow. And that was the whole point, the mission from Jesus when he said, hey, go, which actually means as you go, make disciples, bring others along, that they would do the same thing. And so those are the 6 leadership principles that we put first. And I got to tell you that there is no person that I know of personally that lives out those essentials every day, ever since that I've known him here at Life.Church, than Pastor Jerry Hurley. Pastor Jerry is one of our 5 directional leaders here at Life.Church. He's been here for over 17 years, and he is an amazing leader. In fact, God has used him directly to create a culture here that lives by those essentials and has a culture of feedback. It's directly linked to this man, what God has done in him and through him to really create that feedback here at Life.Church, to accomplish all God wanted to do here and wants to do ongoing. And so I just want you to know, most importantly, he is an incredible follower of Christ. He is an incredible man of God. He's an awesome husband to his wife, Annette. He's an awesome dad to his kids. You know, the Bible says you'll know them by their fruit. Jerry has some abundant, lasting fruit that in his kids that are pursuing God, in the team here at Life.Church that are passionately pursuing Christ first. And so I'm honored, and I'm so glad that he is here with us. So can we give a little bit of online honor, a little bit of online love here for Pastor Jerry Hurley?
Thank you, Brandon. I really appreciate it. It's awesome to be here today with you. And, man, I don't know if I can live up to the introduction, Brandon, but I'll certainly try. I tell you, first I want to just say that I am incredibly proud of our network team, our church-to-church team, Open. Just really am proud of them and all the work that they do, and God is truly using them in huge ways. And I'm glad that each and every one of you are watching and taking time out of your day to listen to me talk for a little while about building a healthy feedback culture in an organization. I do think that it's an incredibly important part of organizational dynamics overall. And so I'm just going to share some thoughts. We'll spend, 35, 40 minutes or so talking about some things I've jotted down, and then we'll hopefully give you some time to ask some questions, and it'll be a great day. So again, thank you very much for being a part, and I'm just going to go ahead and begin to share some of the things about building a healthy feedback culture. I think there may be a PDF that you may be able to download and follow along if you'd like to. And so really, I want to take a step back when we talk about building a healthy feedback culture. I want to take a step back and talk about building a healthy development culture. And I think that's a good place to start, and then I'll work my way into the feedback. And when I say growth and development culture, it's different than a growth or development track or development program. A culture is different than that. And here's what I put. A development program takes an enormous amount of time and resources with limited results. A development culture actually consumes less time and energy and achieves infinitely better results. A way that you can think about it is if you're building a development program, even a discipleship program, I liken that to somebody that works really hard and gets paid by the hour. So you're working hard, you're getting paid by the hour, and it just seems like you're not getting anywhere unless you're working hard. You're no payoff unless you're working hard. A development culture, on the other hand, view that as making a series of wise investments over time and allowing the investments to build on themselves. So the investment is doing the work. I'm not having to work as hard to get a result. The result is happening over and over again. It's like compounding interest. And that's the difference between those two things. There's a lot of things about how the brain works. There's a lot of things about how the millennial generation likes to learn. And a development program or a high potential track or any of those kinds of things are really hard taskmasters. And if we can get to letting the culture work for us, then we'll have infinitely better results with a lot less organizational energy spent on achieving those results. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to talk about the key components of a development culture. And and each component that we'll talk about has an organizational expression. In other words, it expresses itself organizationally, but it also has an individual expression, which means as an individual, it's going to express itself in my life as well. And so I'll try to talk about both of those two expressions as we talk about it. So you see, I've got a little diagram if you're following along with the note. Otherwise, just imagine a triangle. All right, just draw a triangle, and at the top point, put measure results. On the bottom right, put invite feedback. The bottom left, value awareness, and then over the top, I just put development culture. And if you imagine a stool with 3 legs, those are, I believe, 3 legs to make the stool stand up. And so the first thing I want to talk about is measure results. And we have a saying around here that where performance is measured, performance improves. And it's so obvious when you look at, well, why is a 4-minute mile important? Well, the 4-minute mile only is important because somebody was measuring how long it took to run a mile. And so all through human history, people are striving to achieve, and a measurement is a key part of that. There's plenty of examples biblically of measurement. And so what I would say is without measurement, it is very difficult or impossible to assess progress. And even more importantly, assess appropriate progress towards goals. Now, here's something that's interesting. For some reason, there seems to be a reluctance for churches to accept measurement as a viable tool or a place that deserves a seat at the table. And some people would even spiritualize a lack of measurement and with the thought that somehow the Holy Spirit can't work within the context of measuring results. And so I think that actually has a more negative impact than positive impact. I believe I've seen over and over again that the Holy Spirit actually works through our process and planning and measurement and can give us feedback, give us understanding as to how we're doing based on those measurements. So I think that that's just an important thing, and I don't think it's something that as church leaders or leaders, maybe you're in a context that's outside of a church and you're watching, but I think measurement is a key part of a development culture, and because you're not going to strive, you're not going to improve as much, as well, if you don't measure the process. So for the organization, that expression is generally shared goals, consistent measurement of performance to goals over time, and accountability. And those are some organizational expresses. We have goals that we share together that collectively, organizationally, we're trying to achieve. So an example at Life.Church would be attendance. And attendance is a goal that everybody at Life.Church shares that goal, whether you're on the finance team or whether you're at a campus team, whatever that expression is, all of us need to be thinking about how do we make it easy to attend Life.Church? How do we make attending Life.Church something that is special? So that would be just an example. An individual expression of measurement is individual goals with measurement and accountability. And I know some of you are here from the Develop.me, which is all about performance management, and it's all about helping people set goals, helping people follow up on goals, and helping people ultimately at the end of the day be successful in achieving goals. Because collectively, if organizationally and collectively we're achieving the goals that we set, there's a much better chance that we're going to be successful. Even if we miss the goals that were set, there's still a better chance that we're moving the ball down the field. We're making progress towards the things that we believe God has, is important to God and important to what God's calling us to do. So that just seems to make sense. So here's just something, this may be in your notes. It's something that is important to know, is that without measurement, there is no objective framework for providing meaningful feedback. All right, so feedback is where we're ultimately going to end up. And if we don't have a way to measure what we're doing, if we don't have some objective means to determine how well we're doing, it's going to be very difficult for us to have a framework that's objective and meaningful to provide feedback from. And then finally, this is the last thing I'll say about measuring results, is that not everything that can be measured matters, and not everything that matters can be measured. That is absolutely true. And so there are some things that you just can't measure. How do you measure what God is doing in each of us spiritually? I don't know how to do that. I can measure outcomes, but I have a really hard time measuring what God. It doesn't mean it's not important. It just means it's hard to measure it. How do you measure what what's going on culturally in an organization? Very difficult to measure. Again, you look to outcomes, but culture is really an important thing. So that's a good thought. Now let's just talk about valuing awareness. What I would say about awareness is the first step to all growth and development. All growth and development. Whether it's personal, whether it's professional, whether it's spiritual, without awareness, it is impossible to grow. So let me just give you an example spiritually. Unless I come to the awareness of my undone condition in sin without Christ, I have no thought that I need a Savior. I have no thought that I need redemption. I have no thought that I need an answer to my sin problem. But from that awareness comes then an understanding of what Christ can do for me and what Christ has already done for me. and what God stands ready to do and the Holy Spirit in my life. So again, it's from that point of awareness then that the person makes a decision to follow Christ. So no matter what you're looking at, awareness, organizationally and personally, is absolutely the first step to all growth and development. Organizational expression of awareness begins with developing a set of clear values, both operationally, which you might say are core values, and behaviorally, which you might say permission to play values. If you've read any of Patrick Lencioni's books or you've read The Advantage, he talks about core values, aspirational values, and permission to play values. And those core values are clear in determining, and behavioral values are really important to determining awareness organizationally, because the first thing you have to do is you have to spend enough time to understand organizationally some basic things. And so here's what you need to understand. Operational values should express who you are, why you are, and what you do. So why that's important, where awareness comes in, is you have to spend enough time organizationally to be able to identify those things. And it's interesting, it probably was, when Craig founded the church in 1996, he had a good idea of some core values. And as that expression began to move in subsequent years, it was probably 2000, maybe 2000-ish, 2001, before we really had a clear set of all of those values and understanding how they all played together. So it took a little bit of time to get those things, but it's important that you do. And I would say today that Life.Church is first and foremost, after obviously the mission of what we're about, the mission to change, to lead people to become fully devoted followers of Christ. We're all about change lives. Outside of that, we have a very clear understanding of who we are, why we are, and what we do. Behavioral values, on the other hand, where it relates to us as team members, should express how you go about doing it, how you treat each other, how things get done. And so those are how those two values work together. So here's what I would say is the best set of values should be and will be very clear and compelling. If you asked me, Jerry, what's better, more values or less values, I would say less, more compelling, and clear. Southwest Airlines has 3 main values. So that's just it. Now here's the interesting thing. Individual expression, so we talk about the organizational expression, is all about understanding those things, who we are, why we are, what we do. Behavioral values is understanding how we do it. An individual expression comes from the desire to learn about oneself. In an effort and here's the thing, it's not just learning for the sake of learning, but here's what it's really important. It's an effort to better understand God's workmanship in us so that we can better connect with God's plan for us. One of my favorite verses relative to team development and team dynamic is Ephesians 2:10. It says, "For we are God's handiwork, created in Christ Jesus to do good works, which God prepared in advance for us to do." There's a lot in that statement. And so recognize that we are God's masterpiece. Some versions have masterpiece. And literally, as I learn more about myself, as I learn more about people, how they're wired, what motivates, what drives, all those everything, humans are so complex. God has put so much inside each and every one of us that it literally is a lifelong pursuit just to understand God's masterpiece in each and every one of us individually. And then when you connect that to, okay, so why is that important? Because God has plans for us. And he's had plans for us for a really long time. And the better I understand what God put in and what God left out, the better I'm able then to connect with what I believe God's plan for my life is, what God's plans for the ministry are. And so I think that is a really, really important thing. And here's the deal. It's not about building self-esteem. It really is, what I'm looking for in self-awareness is a complete understanding of all of the things that God has put inside of us that are special. But it's also understanding and coming to grips with the things that God left out. And this is something that I really believe, and we talk about it a lot, is that until we come to a more complete understanding of both of those two things, particularly in the things God left out, I believe it's very difficult for us to have a full appreciation of the people God has put around us. Because until we come to the point that we recognize that we're not everything, that we all don't possess everything that we need to be successful, then can I truly appreciate the gifts, the skill, and the ability of the people that God has put around us. God didn't intend for us to do this alone. And so the better you're able to connect with those things, the better you're able to really understand those things, I believe the better you're able to achieve from a point of understanding the tools and the strengths and the great, wonderful gifts that God has put inside of you and express those to their fullest. And the sooner that you can quit trying to be some of the things that we really aren't, and then you can embrace and somebody else helping you with that, being a part, sharing that burden with them, sharing the load, coming together and doing something together that neither one of us can do on our own. So I believe that is a real important thing, and it's important for us to know, and I believe it's an important part of self-awareness and organizational awareness. All right, so then the last thing I'm going to talk about is inviting feedback, and I'll spend a few minutes here, and then we'll open it up for some Q&A. So the first thing I would say on inviting feedback, it is virtually impossible for us to have meaningful measurement or grow in awareness. So it's impossible to have meaningful measurement or growth in awareness without feedback. When you look at feedback, there's a lot of different ways that we get feedback all the time, and honestly, most of the time, we don't ever even think about it. One of the simplest examples of feedback relative to a measured goal is a simple speedometer. You know, you have a posted speed limit, and without a speedometer, it would be really difficult to determine how fast I'm going relative to the speed limit. Am I going faster than the speed limit? Am I going slower than the speed limit? But a simple speedometer provides the feedback that we need on how fast the car is going. And then we know we can grow an appropriate speed for the road, and it keeps us safe. There's a lot of different things that does, and that's just a real simple form of feedback. You think about whatever your organization is. I'm in a church context, so we get weekly feedback in a number of different things, and I think all these things help us understand how we're doing. How are the environments? Are the environments we're producing, creating for people, are they meaningful? Are they attractional? Or is the message that we're putting out, is it meeting people where they are? Is it leading to life transformation? Are people connecting in the way that they need to connect? Are we providing opportunities for that to happen? Are we providing opportunities for people to grow and to serve and all those different kinds of things? And so some simple ways that you get feedback is in numbers, attendance numbers, baptisms, salvations. There's all forms of feedback that you can look at. And all of those things are really are important, and they help us then organizationally understand how we're doing. And once you have the feedback, then you can build a plan of action to figure out, okay, how do we get better at this? What's working? What's not working? Interestingly enough, for an individual, there has to be some outside perspective for us individually in order for self-awareness to occur in our lives. Because it's like we're inside the picture frame, and it's very difficult for the picture to see itself. And so one of the simplest things, and the first method of feedback that most people have is a simple mirror. In fact, it's interesting. Way back in the day, when you realize when they discovered how to make mirrors, it was actually such an amazing thing and such a prized possession to be able just to simply look at your reflection at will in your room, in your home, whatever it is. That it was actually a closely guarded secret on how to make mirrors, and it was something that for years and years and years was this closely guarded secret by a very few people, because people had such a desire, and it was so precious to actually see a reflection of yourself. And I think that is still today, and that is the simplest thing about feedback individually is, okay, how do we have those reflections of ourselves? And there's a lot of different ways to get feedback. There's tools. There are assessment tools. There are ways. There just trust and people coming and talking to you about feedback. There's just so many different ways that you can get feedback, both organizationally and individually. So I want to talk a little bit about key elements that must be present in order for a culture of feedback to exist in an organization. And these do have ramifications both for the organization and then for the individual. And the first thing has to be a high degree of mutual trust and humility. That has to be the foundation point for all feedback. Honestly, even things as simple as, I have a piece of broccoli in my tooth, or for whatever, maybe I left my pants unzipped, whatever it might be. It's really interesting that that people that love you, people that care about you, people that have your best interest in mind, sometimes may not tell you that you have that obvious thing. The bat hanging out of the belfry in your nose, whatever it might be. And it's just really interesting that even though it's something that is relatively a simple process mentally, it is just sometimes difficult for people to give feedback. And it's not that they don't care, it's that there's risk involved. How is this person going to respond to feedback? How's this person going to take it? Am I overstepping my bounds? Is this really, is it really that big a deal? I just don't want to go there. There's just a lot of different things that can get in the way of people giving us feedback. And so trust and humility are absolutely important and vital. If you don't start with with that foundation, I don't believe you can ever have a true environment where feedback is freely given. We have a statement here that has been around for a while, is that feedback should be given with trust and received with humility. And so if for whatever reason there is a challenge organizationally with feedback and you're thinking, okay, where do we start? The first thing I would start with is a sense of trust. And how do we then build underlying trust relationally so that we can share? Because I don't believe that the level of feedback can ever outpace the underlying level of trust. And while we're talking about trust, I want to share something that I believe about organizational trust as it relates to team. All right, may I ask the question? In fact, I saw a blog post recently that somebody had said, okay, the term is that, or the thing was, okay, is trust given or earned, is the question. And my philosophy for a long time has been that trust should be given, mistrust should be earned. So I saw this blog post the other day, and this person had been asked that question. He'd been mulling it around in his mind. I'm sorry, I don't remember where I saw it. Maybe I'll put something out when I can direct you there afterwards. And he said, so he began to mull that over in his mind, and he began to ask his friends and people around him. And it came to about 30% thought that trust, that sounded right, trust should be freely given. About 30% were neutral, and about 30% thought absolutely not, you had to earn trust. And so, but here's what I know in the context of team. In the context of team, I believe the concept that trust should be freely given is an absolute imperative. And here's why. If we have to take the time to build trust relationships with everybody that we interact with, by the time all of that is done, the opportunity will have long passed us by. And the huge casualty to a lack of trust organizationally is speed. It's the ability to execute. It's the ability to get things done. It's the ability to move the ball down the field. And when you think about what's at stake in our context, in the context of the church, it literally is lives are at stake. Spiritual well-being is at stake. And so you really can't, should we really wait for us to build all of that web of trust relationships before we're able to move? Now, here's the thing. I know that there are some of you out there that are skeptical about this whole idea of that trust should be given, mistrust should be earned. But that's absolutely the case. And so here's what I'm talking. I'm not talking about used car salesmen. I'm not talking about, walking down a dark alley and there's people at the other end, you trust them. I'm only talking about in the context of family, honestly, and the context of team. And here's the thing. Just be willing to risk. Be willing to be vulnerable. Be willing to forgive. Be willing to to extend trust. Because at the end of the day, even if you have a relationship, you're still going to have to extend trust. It's still a risk, whether you know the person or not, whether you've got a long-term or short-term relationship. And just because you've extended trust doesn't mean that somebody's not going to violate that trust. That's just the nature of humanity. And so I would just say that extending trust and the concept that trust is given, mistrust is earned is important. Just biblically, treat others as you would have them treat you, right? And so how many of us, if I asked you, how many of you want to be trusted? Everybody would say, yeah, absolutely. Well then, treat people the way that you'd like to be treated. Trust them. And I believe that the benefits will far outweigh the occasional risk and the occasional hiccup. And then when somebody violates your trust, forgive quickly. And I think I've been blessed to work on the leadership team at Life.Church for a long time with the same group of people, and I think that's a blessing for us, is to have a cohesive leadership team that's been on a long time, and there's an absolute incredible amount of trust. But over the time, any one of us over the course of time has done things that violate trust. We've maybe got personal. We've done a lot of different things, and you can't hang on to that. You just have to forgive and move on. So that's the first thing. Key elements in order culture of feedback is trust, mutual respect, and humility. The other thing is a clear set of values and culture. I talked about values early on. It is absolutely important to have cultural and organizational clarity. It's those questions that we talk about: who we are, why we are, what we do, and how we do it. And here's how I would do that. Is cultural clarity, the way I would express it is cultural clarity is the organizational immune system. It enables the organization to self-correct. And the more clarity there is culturally, then the easier it is for that to happen. The hazier the organizational clarity becomes, then the harder it is. It just becomes murky and muddy. And we have this statement, we talk about it all the time: is there organizational clarity, cultural clarity, or is there cultural haze? In other words, is it confusing? Is what people are supposed to do, when they're supposed to do it, are they clear about that? Or is that confusing? And if it's confusing, then we have to work to clarify it, because what's going to happen, what that breeds is it breeds politics. It breeds people trying to figure out what they're supposed to be doing, and they're trying to solve problems that they frankly can't solve. It's not theirs to solve. The culture will solve those problems. So when you're having problems, let culture be your guide. And it really can act as, I believe, the organizational immune system. And a strong culture will prevent so many different problems from arising. So if that's the case with you, and you're thinking about your own culture, and you say, well, how clear is our culture? And if it's clear to me, how clear is it to the people that are 6 people away from me, or 10 people away from me, or if someone's been on the team less than a year, how clear is it to them? And how are we communicating those different things? And I believe those are all important parts about developing a culture where feedback is likely to be a part of it. The other thing, simply, I would say, is having a growth mindset versus a fixed mindset. And this is something, as I've learned a little bit more about how the brain works, these are two mindsets, and there's more and more research about these all the time. And a fixed mindset would be characterized by this way: that we're born smart, we can't change, effort doesn't help, feedback is dangerous, stretch goals are bad, and other success is a problem. And compare that with a growth mindset, and it's things like we're born to learn, we can change, effort is central, feedback is helpful, stretch goals are good, and other success is an opportunity to learn. And so those things are relatively simple, and you might say, well, those things, are they hardwired in us? Are we born with that predisposition? And actually, we're not. You can actually prime people, and you can actually get people to think in one of these two ways. And so there are things that we can do organizationally that reinforce a fixed mindset, and there are things that we can do and value organizationally and individually that can inform a growth mindset, or give us a catalyst for people to have a growth mindset. And I think those are really, really important things, which leads us to the next thing. The fourth thing there is willingness to embrace failure. And what I would say is failure is not an option, it's an imperative. If you're not willing to embrace failure, if you're not willing to accept failure, if you're not willing to even sometimes champion that in the right context and in the right way, then you're going to make it more difficult for feedback to occur. And so, and it gives you more fuel for feedback to be received when you understand that failing is just part of life. Failing is part of moving forward. And I would say there are very few significant things that we've been able to do as a ministry that actually weren't born out of some sort of failure. It generally wasn't the first learning that was successful. It was generally the third or the fourth or the fifth that finally was able to get it right and make some serious inroads. And then the fifth key element there would be that these things need to be incorporated into your human systems. Feedback. It needs to be incorporated into your human systems. And I would say this, human systems all human systems. And so what are human systems? Human systems are things like how you bring people on the team, how you release people from your team, what gets rewarded, what gets punished, those different kind of things, all of those human systems, how you bring people on, how you remove people, how people get promoted, how the course of what you do from just all of the systems relative, your performance management system, like a develop.me, all of those different things, all those human systems should all be flowing and supporting and leading and pointing towards your mission and direction. And so that's something that you have to be very intentional, because it's easy to get off a little bit. It's easy to get programs or ideas or thoughts in your human systems that aren't leading to the outcomes that you want. And it looks great on paper. But over the course of time, it's actually leading you further and further away from the mission at hand. So I would just say that make sure that your human systems do reinforce everything. And so in this case, it would be reinforcing feedback. So how then do you do that? And so I'll just tell you about a couple of the systems that we have that are human systems that reinforce feedback. One is part of our selection process. Our selection process has a high degree of feedback associated with it. It's a relatively challenging process, and there's a lot of feedback because we want to make sure that individuals understand, one, that that is an organizational reality, and the ability to receive feedback in a healthy way is an important part of success on this team. And so it just reinforces that value. When people are on the team, we have any number of different multi-rater tools. In other words, multi-rater tools are tools that I'm asking for feedback from people around any number of different things, whether it's team member engagement or operational awareness or emotional intelligence or any number of different things. There's tools that we use that invite feedback. And I'll be honest with you, for us, it's really easy because Craig Rochelle is our senior pastor. And from as long as I can remember, Craig has been a leader that has asked for and desired feedback in his messages, in his leadership, in all those different things. So our leader has modeled this willingness to receive feedback, what I think is special. And it's one of the many things that I admire and appreciate about Craig. And I believe it helps set the tone organizationally. So as a leader in your organization, make sure that you're modeling receiving feedback in how you do it. All right, so I'm going to look a little bit at some research about why people fail, and this has to do with, we just talked about human systems, and I just talked about some of the human systems that we have and how feedback plays a part in that. There's some research that this is a study by Leadership IQ, and you can get it to the web. I'll probably should have had the link there, but it's by Leadership IQ, and it's why new hires fail. You could do a Google search and find it simple enough. But it's a large leadership study with multiple organizations, multiple hiring managers over a long period of time, and it had to do with, in the first 18 months, what is the likelihood that a person will fail or thrive at work. So here's what it is. 46% of newly hired employees will fail within 18 months of a new job. 46%. Interestingly enough, only 19% will achieve unequivocal success. That's pretty sobering. I mean, think about it. It's essentially a coin flip. And I'm not talking a study of one or two people, a couple of organizations. I mean, it's thousands of hiring managers in organizations of all different types and sizes. And it comes down to a coin flip would have almost been as good. And so that's pretty sobering to me. And so then what are the reasons why people aren't successful? Is it that they can't do the job? Are they incompetent? Well, what's going on? So they looked at the research, and here are the number one reason that people aren't successful. 26% of those that failed because they couldn't accept feedback. 23% because they were unable to understand and manage emotions. 17% because they lack the necessary motivation to excel. 15% because they have the wrong temperament for the job. And actually only 11% because they lack the necessary technical skill to do the job. And that's so true. And that's why understanding and having human systems that reinforce this whole concept of feedback and coachability is because that's one of the significant litmus tests as to why people are successful in what they do. And so it's also really important organizationally, if this is something that you're going to want to grow and develop in your organization, in your church, then that's something that you need to pay attention to and begin to model those things. There's I don't know if I should share this or not, but I probably will. I've shared things I shouldn't share before. But this is a little thing that I can't even remember where I came up with it. I think somebody wrote it. We were doing something around feedback or maybe hiring. I can't remember what it was. And somebody wrote this little thing on a notepad of mine. And it said this. It says, at Life.Church, you're expected to digest feedback and crap excellence. So I don't know for what that's worth. I don't think I would tweet that. I might get in trouble. But anyway, I just thought it was funny. Somebody wrote it. And, honestly, if you talk to somebody on our team, they would say, yeah, that's probably true. But that just gives you an example. It's interesting that just gives you an example of feedback in our culture and just how normal it is to talk about it. So there's also something, too, as we talk about feedback, there have been, over the course of time, I've come to recognize that there's different ways that people will respond to feedback. And that's just important to know because you can help people grow and you can watch over time how people respond to feedback. So this is something Sam Roberts, who leads all of campus operations at Life.Church, he and I work closely together, as I do with all the other directional leaders. But we've spent a lot of time talking about how people receive feedback, and we've categorized it into these 4 things. All right. So this is how combinations of responses to feedback. From worst to best, okay? Worst case scenario to best case scenario. The first one is, in the initial conversation when you're providing feedback, the person responds poorly to the feedback. And whether it's defensiveness or just attitudinally or some way they're responding poorly in the moment, and then make no meaningful movement in any direction. So you kind of have the worst. In the moment, they're not responding well, and then there's not really any significant movement. The next one, and this is again, from worst to best, there are those that respond well and are attentive to the feedback that you're giving them. So that conversation, you leave that conversation thinking, oh, that went well. That was great. The person understood. The person heard. They're receptive to the feedback that I gave. Then there's no meaningful improvement. In other words, after the conversation, nothing happened. And then the next one is there are those that receive feedback poorly in the moment. And so that conversation was just harder than it needed to be. It just had more energy than you would have liked it to have. You had to be more directive than you'd hoped to be, or whatever the case may be. In that moment, you walked away from that conversation thinking, I'm not sure how that went. But after some reflection, the person actually makes meaningful improvement and change based on the feedback that you gave them. And while in that moment it may not feel good, I would take that all day long over somebody that in the moment it felt great, but then nothing meaningful happened. And then obviously where you'd want to be and where you'd hope that people people that respond well and are attentive in the moment and are able then to make meaningful improvement. And that's like the gold standard of receiving feedback. But over the course of years, we've just kind of recognized those things, and it's become something that we talk about. It's something that you can coach to. So when you have a conversation, you can actually coach and say, hey, we had this conversation, and I noticed that in the moment, it felt good, but man, I haven't seen anything happen. Let's talk about that. And you can take that feedback to a whole nother level. So feedback is really, really an important part organizationally for us. And I want to switch gears a little bit and let's talk about just understanding what I would call momentum. And it has to do once I receive feedback and I say, okay, I've received the feedback, I've become aware, I know that there's something that I need to do, I know there's a place I need to grow. Here's some things that I would do is, one, just understand the laws of momentum and how they work for you and how they work against you. So I'm an individual and somebody's giving me feedback, and now then I want to go ahead and grow. Well, the first thing that I would hope, and the first thing I believe you'll see, and maybe even you want to talk about when you're talking about building a culture of feedback, what you want to get to is that feedback isn't given to me. I'm receiving feedback and I hold it and I protect it and I don't let anybody see it. Because here's the thing about feedback that's really interesting is, one, feedback is a gift. Feedback is absolutely a gift. And here's the only thing that changes when somebody gives me feedback. The only thing that changes is now I know what everybody else already knew. And so that's the only thing that changes. And that is a wonderful, wonderful thing, and it's a gift. So always when you put yourself in a position to receive feedback well. and recognize that it is a gift, because now then I just know what everybody else thought. I just know what everybody else knew. And it's a great reconciler. And so then the other part of that, the tendency is going to be, I get a hard message, okay? And as leaders, we're going to model this. And the way we model it is going to largely affect how that organizational culture actually spreads. Because if it doesn't happen in me, if it doesn't happen in Craig, if it doesn't happen in Sam and Bobby and Kevin, it's not going to happen anywhere else. And so that's the thing that you've got to realize. And so here's the thing. You can either take that feedback and then protect it and hide it, or you can take that feedback and share it. And so one of the most powerful things you can do when somebody gives you feedback, especially hard feedback, is to share with the people that are closest to you. And not just share, not from the perspective, oh, can you believe what he said or what she said? No, it's, you know what? I understand now. I see what you see. I see what you think. This is something I really want to grow in. So I would like for you to invite them to be part of the transformation. That's a powerful thing. People want to be involved. And so I can take it and I can hide it, or I can take it and I can share it. And while it may be easier to hide it, I'm telling you, it's much more powerful to share it. And if you want to really build a culture of feedback, that's the best way to do it. So take that issue and say, man, I really want to work on this. Now, here's the other thing to remember. Let's say I've really worked hard and I've got some feedback, and this is true of me, by the way. I've had some really difficult feedback over the course of time. I'm very appreciative and thankful for it because it's really helped me to grow. And I have a long way to go yet. But so I get some feedback, and I'm really trying to work hard at it. Now, here's the thing I've got to understand. I have to understand that perception lags reality. So I can be making progress, but the people that interact with me, their perception is going to be lodged where it was. In other words, it's the law of motion, that objects at rest tend to stay at rest, objects in motion tend to stay in motion until an equal or greater force act on that to change its direction. So what that means is their perception is going to stay what it was unless somehow I have a force great enough to change their perspective. Does that make sense? So in a sense, I have to advertise the change. Now, I'm not saying blow your own horn. I'm not saying that. I'm saying there are ways to advertise change. There are ways to let people know that you're making progress in a way that's appropriate. Now, if you do it in a way that's prideful, or if you're advertising the change and then you're not doing it, well, that's bad. That's false advertisement. You don't want to do that, because then you'll double down on the whole problem that you had to begin with. So don't do that. But it is important to advertise change. Here's another thing that's important, is it's important not to reinforce the perspective you're trying to change. And I'm going to give you a quick example. I am an intuitive perceiver, okay? I'm an INFP is my personality type. Those of you that know personality type, you just said, oh man, he's an INFP. Wow, okay. But anyway, that's neither here nor there. But so that means that there are some things about me, like if I'm not careful, I can be late to a meeting, or if I'm not careful, I can do any number of different things. But let's just say late to a meeting. I recognized that I was saying things, even though I was working really, really hard at that and had made a ton of progress, I would say things and I would do things that would reinforce the old perception. So I had to recognize I was working against myself. So little things like my schedule is sometimes really, really tight. And so I'm often going from one meeting to another. And I used to walk into a meeting and you would see that. You would feel it. I'd be hurried. I would walk in and I'd be out of breath. And I realized that's feeding that perception. So now I just take a moment, collect myself before I sit down in a meeting. And it's like, okay, it's very intentional about when I was going to be here and why I was going to be here. If I'm a minute late because of a legitimate reason, I just explain why. And I talk about it. But it's from a different place. And so I would just encourage you to understand momentum, understand how momentum works, advertise change, and then don't reinforce perspectives that you want to shift and you're trying to shift. And that can be individually or organizationally. All right, so I have talked a lot about building a culture of feedback. I hope that it's been helpful. Brandon, why don't you come back up? Why don't we ask some questions? People may have some, and you may even have some questions right off the top. As you heard me talking, you say, yeah, Jerry, man, you ought to bring out this. Or you, man, if you'd have connected this dot, it would have been clearer to people.
Yeah. Well, first, thanks. We're going to jump into a few. We actually do have some questions, and we've been going through them. So we're going to hit some of your questions, and we'll just go until we have time here. So let me jump in. And to remind me, I got something really great to tell you from one of our participants. You're going to like it.
Okay,
You're going to like it. But first, let's go to Jordan and Laura asked a similar question, and it's really the idea of where do you start creating a feedback culture. And part of the other question was just tips on how do you begin that conversation if you're in a structure that hasn't been in that place before, or if maybe it's traditional church, or maybe they this is new to them, and maybe they have the corporate people as well. And how do you start feedback culture?
That's a great question. The first thing you have to start doing is you have to start talking about it. You have to start talking about feedback and what it is and why it's important. And so that's the first thing you have to do is you can't have a feedback culture and never say feedback. And then what I would do is, honestly, I think I would begin to build safe ways. I'd go back to the top and say, okay, make sure that you're measuring things. In other words, if you're not measuring things, that's an easy way to take a step. Getting people thinking about goals, having a framework which went to provide some feedback. So if you've got to have some objective goal or objective measure of performance to be able then to give feedback that's appropriate. So begin to set those things and identify. What I would do is I wouldn't go try to make something up. I would figure something that's really important to you. Figure something that you're really trying to solve. And put some things around it, and then begin to talk about it in ways, and use feedback, use the term feedback, and just be real obvious about what you're trying to do. People will get it; they'll catch on.
Yeah. It almost Sherry asked the question: specific ways to help the growth mindset. You almost answer that in the sense that a feedback culture is a growth mindset, and that feedback really creates and helps you to grow. And so, at Network Churches, we always say, we're growing further and faster together, and you probably get tired of hearing it. Or, no, I'm just kidding. They get excited about hearing it because that's the reason. It's not about the growth of our church, but because God has created us that way, and it creates a culture. So even starting something and measuring, without having, hey, let's sit down and let me have some feedback. It might be just creating some of those things that you don't have in place yet if it's right at the beginning.
And celebrate growth. I mean, celebrate that. Celebrate. I mean, even talk about the reason why you're doing it. You're not doing it because you want to rain on people's parade. You want to do it because you really want to help people grow. And as a leader, then you all start with, hey, help me grow. So every year I ask my team, hey, what can I do different? What can I do better? How can I support you better? And those are just ways to help people give feedback. And I do think you have to train people actually to give you feedback. I mean, I really do. So start small, start with little things, and then train people to give you feedback, and I think that's important.
Okay, that's awesome. That's awesome. So you mentioned some practical ways. Curl 365. That's pretty impressive. That actually what he curled. That
is.
But he asked, what are practical ways that you do feed? That you give feedback? What channels do you use? You mentioned the selection process, some of the assessments. Anything else? I know there's a lot of different systems that we've put together here. Anything else that you think is really important that you've valued here?
Well, here's the thing. Feedback is there is not an event that we put on for team or otherwise that there's not a feedback form associated with it. There's not a time. I can almost promise you. There is not a time when a campus pastor steps off stage after communicating on a weekend that he doesn't go to his team and say, okay, what could I have done better? And that's been modeled by Craig. It's been modeled so long that it's not, people don't wait to ask. I mean, people don't wait for me to offer. I'm telling you, it is just one of those things, what could I have done better? Here's the thing, I promise you, when this is over, we're going to sit around and say, what could have made that better? How could we have made the content how can we dial it in a little bit better? I may never give this talk again, but we're going to get the feedback because it's important.
Yeah. In fact, Charlie Letourneau, one of our growth pastor at Network Churches, he's sitting in the room with us, but he was talking about how people grow at the level they see, not that they hear, and really talking about the speed of the leader. The speed of the leader is the speed of the group. And I know you've been chatting, y'all sort of been talking through that in the chat area, but that's the idea of one of the things here. When you talk about a culture of feedback and then creating and then having feedback systems, if you create the culture of feedback, it's amazing how the systems just naturally fit in, and that's always been the case from leadership. So from top leadership here at Life.Church has always been feedback that they've taken and actually applied, and that's pretty empowering when you're like, wow, okay, that, then I can. This is a safe place.
And here's the thing: people are growing.
Yeah.
I mean, when people really can see that they're making progress, that they can do more this year than they could last year, that's exciting, and people want that. I believe people want to wake up in the morning and be excited about where they go to work, who they go to work with, and their opportunity to grow. I think people but we just don't always connect those dots.
Yeah. Well, I agree. Yes, sir, I do. So this is from Al, I believe. It says, do you have a list of questions for team leaders to generate constructive feedback? So if you're actually, maybe it is the actual feedback, it's a one-on-one or whatever that looks. What are some of the questions that generate feedback, some things that help get that started?
Oh, yeah. I think there are good. I think just simply asking, and again, first thing I would do is just make sure that you've established enough trust in the relationship that you can do that. And so here's the thing: depending on how your organization is predisposed for trust to be something that's given, that's going to be a short amount of time. If you're in an organization where, man, I've really got to work hard to build this trust, and that's going to take a little bit longer. So here's what I would say: is use questions or start at a place that's appropriate to the level of equity and trust that you have with that person. There's for me to go up to somebody that doesn't know me very well and say, hey, tell me 3 ways I could get better. And it's a person who's been on the team a week. They probably aren't going to feel comfortable telling me that. But I could go to you and say, tell me how to get better. Well, in fact, when we're down, I'm going to say, what could this have been better? And you're going to tell me.
Yeah.
And so I would just start small, start with little things, start with, hey, how can I help you? How do you like to meet? How can I make this work better for you? Those different kinds of things to get them involved, and then you can start that process.
So trust is one that they were asking about, and that trust is so important. Give it as a team. I love that you give and then you earn the mistrust. Handmade AJ, I love you guys' handle. This is great. Says, how do you handle a situation in which a team member violates trust? Or also, when do you communicate to a team that what your expectations are for trust? How does that look?
All right, so the first part is, so what do you do? Okay, so first of all, what you got to recognize is that there's going to be a time where somebody is going to violate your trust, and that could look like anything. It could just be that somebody failed to deliver something that they had committed to. Mm-hmm. It could be that somebody hurt you in a way, or maybe it was personal in feedback, and so that hurt, and so that is going to happen, and so I wouldn't go into it thinking, that I would go into it thinking this way, is that the risk is worth the reward. And there is a certain amount of trust, a certain amount of risk in extending trust. And just recognize, not every investment's going to pay off. There's going to be those that, so what I would do is when somebody does that, be honest about it. Have a constructive conversation about the issue, come to a point of forgiveness, and then move on and extend trust again. And here's the thing, I think some people have this mindset that when trust is violated, I'm just going to take years for that person to rebuild my trust. It could, if that's the way you want it. You could just as easily just re-extend trust again.
That's good.
Now I know at some point, with a person, the person proves untrustworthy. But if that's the case, the person should be on your team. And there are times that actually is the case, and that's human nature. At times you'll run across those. But those are so rare. In my experience, I'm talking probably 17 years of doing this, 20 years before this in leadership, and maybe a handful of times has I proven to somebody that's absolutely untrustworthy. So you're in control of that, and how much are you willing to risk? How much are you willing to extend? But I think that. I guess that's a good answer to the question. Did I answer the second part of that question?
There's a, what was this? I believe you did. When do you communicate to the team what your expectations are for trust?
I would just often. Right. For me, the first time I talked about that was probably 6-7 years ago at one of our all-staff meetings, and I talked about the whole concept of extending trust. And what I didn't realize is there's people that for me, it just seemed like, oh, that's no big deal. But I've since realized I'm a very accepting person, and not everybody. Some people are more skeptical, and that's okay. But it still doesn't mean it's not important.
That's right. Well, it does lead from Greg. There's a question, is there a method you follow in giving constructive criticism to avoid the personal injury on the other side? So when you are giving the feedback, that is, here are some things you could work on. What's some methods you use?
Well, I think some of the best ways to do it is first thing you have to recognize is if I am, the best way to actually do it is to ask a question first. For me, the best thing. Well,
we were just talking about this the other day, Jerry.
Well, okay, but here's why. When I'm saying, Brandon, here's what you did, immediately the brain's going to say, defend. It's human nature. So, but if I say, Brandon, what do you think? How do you think that went? What would you, and then so the conversation is different because I'm asking you, and then I can shape the conversation. And you may be right on. I may say, Brandon, what did you think? And you thought exactly what I did. Your self-perception is clear and on point. And I said, okay, how can I help? Well, let's move on. But if yours is off, then I can shape, but I'm shaping perception, then I'm not actually dealing, because that makes, it feels differently in the conversation. So I think that's a healthy way to do that.
Yeah, that's good. Can you have too much feedback?
Yes, absolutely.
In your culture?
Absolutely.
What would that look like?
Well, it looks like, and we've had this. We've had too much feedback. We've had. You've got campus leadership and central leadership, and you've got a lot of different people speaking into different things, and sometimes that can be confusing. There were times that I might tell somebody something, and Sam may have a different perspective, and so this person's kind of caught in the middle. And so the first thing is you just recognize that that's a possibility. And then it shapes how I say, hey, what has Sam said about this? Or have you got any feedback about this before? And people have to have permission to say, hey, that's different than the feedback that Sam gave me. And then here's the important thing organizationally, and I know we're getting close to time. Do not put the team leader, that team person in the middle. In other words, it's not the team member that's the issue. It's me and Sam are the issue in this case, right? So I've got to go work it out with Sam. So I say, okay, you do what Sam said, and I'll work it out with Sam. We'll sort it out. And then we'll get back with you. So it's because it's not the team member issue. It's an issue where, or it does. I'm just using Sam as an example. It rarely happens anymore, but when it does. Then we just work it out, and then it's clear again for the organization.
Yeah. And I think we could just end on this idea there, and this would hit a lot, but Chad P. just wrote, in a healthy culture of feedback, the suggestion of healthy ratio of a positive to, and he quotes negative, but
sure.
To have that feedback, is there kind of ratio that you're looking at, or is that something you're intentional about?
I don't know. I know that there probably is actually a ratio of seven times. I don't know what it is. I'm telling you, there's probably a ratio, but I don't know who keeps track of that stuff. Okay, I've said 7 times. Okay, now he's tuned up for a bad one. We don't work like that. But here's what I would say: if I'm giving more negative feedback than I'm giving positive feedback to the team around me, that's my problem, not their problem.
Yeah.
Because they're doing plenty for me to recognize in a positive way, and so I don't know if you're going to keep tick marks or whatever, but I would say if you're giving more negative feedback than positive, that's probably an issue with you.
Yeah.
Or your organization, and that's something that probably should spend some time correcting.
I think probably hearing from a place that has really built a culture of feedback, that's probably not as an issue anymore. Probably the team would sort of agree. In other words, there's just such trust that's given. But maybe as you're starting, I think it's really important to say, if it's only negative,
Sure.
then there is an issue that's happening. What are some of the things that this team member brings? What's some of the strengths that you can really, because that is, somebody asked that question as well, just focusing on strengths, because this feedback isn't about weaknesses.
Oh no, absolutely
feedback is
not.
A gift. And
yeah,
so
absolutely. And honestly, the truth is that people are probably less aware of their strengths than they are their weaknesses.
Yeah.
And you can't use a tool that you don't know you have. I mean, you don't have a gift. If you don't realize you have a gift, you'll never exercise it. And so, absolutely, that's a huge part of feedback, is unlocking the positives as much as correcting the negatives.
Well, I just want to say thanks, and I want to share Quint. I noticed in the chat he was asking how long you've been working here with Craig and Bobby, and so you've been here for 17 years, right? Real close to the beginning. But what I really wanted you to hear is he said it's another Life.Church gun show. And I just wanted you to bring that back to Craig and Bobby. So,
sure.
Sure. I know. We just these leaders and their guns.
I don't know where that came from. Okay, anyway.
Isn't that great?
That is. Thank you for using that. It must have been the lens on the camera. I don't know.
Well, you asked for the right lens, so there it was.
I did.
Man, thank you so much for
for
sharing with
me.
the church, the capital C Church. And, we do this at Network Churches. We have trainings. We'll let you guys know. All of the links that you were talking about, we'll get these from Jerry as we get some feedback, and we will get them out to you. So we'll get all that to you. So be sure that right below, that if you haven't let us know that you're here, just fill out that form. It's like 3 fields. And that way you'll get all the information, the notes, and some other content around this topic. And so I know that this is such an important piece. And so this is how I'm going to do. I'm just going to pray it out, that God would do what only He can do with all this content that we've gotten to share together. God, I thank you so much for what you're doing in your church. And God, I pray that all the words that were spoken and the content and the learnings, God, that you would really sink it deep into each one of these leaders. I pray that there would be fruit that would only be from you, because, God, all of this is for your glory, and we honor you with it. And so I pray every action step that is taken from this moment, from this time together, that you would bless it and that you would use it to further your church, to grow your church, because you are passionate about those that don't know you. And so, God, I thank you. Thank you for Pastor Jerry. Thank you for all these leaders that are here, and it's in Jesus' name we pray. Amen.